Okay, so we continue on chapter 4, which is Ishmael's characteristics. So as I was saying, we're talking about two contradictory terms. We're talking about Tselem Elokim, and we're talking about Adam, which is related to Adamah, which is earth. So therefore, in other words, what it means is that man is basically composed of two parts: an earthly physical part and a metaphysical soul, which was blown in, literally blown in, to mankind from Hashem. So there are two ways of describing man: one using the material, earthly part, and the other one using the metaphysical. So therefore, we have two parts of, and they're kind of opposite. I mean, you have the soul, which basically is metaphysical, and to and is drawn to godly qualities, and then you have the body, which is earthly and is drawn to those kind of desires, which are to do with food, sexuality, ego, and all those other things. Okay, and all of mankind has these. Okay, but the Jewish people, over a period of time, have become separated from the rest of the world, and are called the children of God. Okay, and that's all over the Torah, as you know, and the world knows about it. So so obviously we know that because we have an element of divinity in us, we obviously strive to resemble God. We strive to understand what God is, although we don't know really, but we do have some insights into that, and therefore we try and emulate God. And therefore that mission of emulating God was actually given to the Jewish people. It's a sublime mission, and we were specifically for over a whole process, which you know, but basically at the end of the day we were that's our mission, is to emulate God to the best of our ability, and by doing that we'll be an example to the rest of the world. So what it says is that the word Adam is actually, to describe man, is actually only used in reference to the Jews. But we then find that in fact it's not only the Jews, it's also referred to when talking about Ishmael and the people of Ishmael. So therefore, and that's in the words Pere Adam, so wild man. But the word Adam is being used. So it goes into the reasons why, and obviously it goes back to Abraham, because Abraham had two sons. He had, his first son was actually Ishmael. His second son was Yitzhak. And of course we know that the Muslims had changed, when they describe what happened in the Quran, they basically interchange the two. They when we talk about Yitzhak, they talk about Ishmael. So therefore, and of course the reasons are obvious. I mean, they're monotheists. They pray 5 times a day. So these are people that have a respect for God and believe in God, and that's a very strong belief. But there's that word pere, wild. Okay, so now what does that word wild mean? So Rabbi Chaim Vital elaborates: other nations have always ruled over each other, but not Ishmael, who have always been desert nomads, and who have no regular contact with others. They are like robbers, it's described. And by the way, there's a note here which says that the robbery extends to the falsifications of the Torah found in the Quran. Remember, I told you they interchanged the two. They are robbers who go out to rob others and return to their tents. As it says, he will be a wild man. Targum Onkelos, so he describes what the word wild man means. It means one who kills people. So basically, inherent in their way of life is going to be murder. And of course, They call it killing sinners. Okay? But they will also have a deep faith in God. Okay, they will have a deep faith in God. So therefore, they're going to make a big error. This is one of the big flaws, fundamental flaws, is that they're linking their faith to murder. And murder is elevated. In other words, killing people as a religious duty has a high value in the Quran. And it actually says his hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. That's actually in the Torah in Bereshit 16:12. So he's always going to be in conflict amongst themselves and with other people. And also, what's odd about the grammar is that the word pere is before the word man, which is normally not the way Hebrew is spoken. Because basically the pere, the wildness, is basically going to be much more of Ishmael's essence than the man, the wildness. Okay. I should have said Adam pere, but it doesn't. Okay. Okay. And that's why the exile is going to be so difficult for us, and because of these qualities that Ishmael has. So, for example, the Chafetz Chaim says this. So basically, and of course, somebody will say, well, that may be, but they can change. But no, the Chafetz Chaim says that it is part of our tradition that everything written in the Torah has eternal ramifications. So it is with the Torah's description of Ishmael as a wild man. This too is eternal. Even if you find Ishmaelites who are well-educated professionals, they will never shed this basic trait. You see it today, by the way. You see it in the universities, the intellectuals. They, support Hamas. They support what Hamas did. We can see it in the streets, and it's obvious. Okay, right. So that was this is kind of a background to what's going on. Okay. So we're now going back into some of the historical processes that have taken place between Israel and the Arabs. So the first thing has been the story of land for peace. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it's very obvious that it's obviously has not worked. But that's what we did. We've been trying to use a policy of containment, and one of the pillars of that containment has been land for peace. So we've handed over territories. We've signed peace accords. And basically, again, it was spoken about in much of our literature, Tehillim, Tehillim and various other parts, and also the Rambam. The Rambam, remember, we've experienced this in other ways before. So the Rambam in the 12th century supported the Yemenite community because they reached out to him and they said they were under huge oppression from the Ishmaelites in Yemen, and he helped them. So he wrote a very famous letter called Igeret Teman, or very famous letters, and Igeret Teman, which translates as letters to Yemen, and he gave them advice. So he says here, even King David of Blessed Mary, when he saw by means of divine inspiration all the troubles that would befall Israel, cried out and lamented in the name of the people of the evil of Ishmael's sons. And he said, woe to me, for I have lived in Meshech, and I have dwelled amongst the tents of Kedar. Note that he singled out Kedar from among Ishmael's sons. This is because their prophet Muhammad descended from Kedar, as he reports in his ancestry records. So this is the Rambam talking in Igeret Teman. Despite this, we are unable to escape their evil and capriciousness. Whenever we pursue peace with them, they harass us with boycotts and war. As King David said, I am peace, but when I speak, they are for war. So again, this is nothing new. It was happening already in the 12th century in Yemen and in the time of the Rambam. And he says it. We look for peace, and they're just not interested. And basically, again, the imams have been speaking openly about it. They're saying even if they give us the territories, it's not going to be enough, and the other territories still remain stolen. So Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, all of them. They're all still stolen, and we want those as well. Haifa, okay, all of those. So basically, we it's now absolutely clear, especially with the whole Gaza debacle, that land for peace is not a solution. So basically, of course, the Torah would not advise, okay, us to behave this way, and okay. So now we're going to actually try and explore the source of this conflict. Okay, so we've basically, we see that it was predicted. We've spoken about what the current events are. Okay, except I haven't covered what happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. But we're going to go back now to the spiritual source of the conflict. So basically, this is now part 2 of the book. It's chapter 1. Okay, so we have a tradition handed down to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, that at the end of days, which the general consensus is that where we are. That's where we are now. There are 15 different ways in which the world there will be a degradation of the world. Okay? And here he says very clearly, this is because this will happen when the Jewish nation abandons the Torah and it tries to become like every other nation. Amazing that it says this. In our times, he says, the above problems have proliferated as a natural outcome of the abandonment of the Torah. The most serious of these, he mentions, are the growth of insolence and the spread of licentiousness. We see this plague spreading in the land of Israel to a shocking degree. It seems, however, that the central feature of the 15 is that the government will turn towards heresy. That is, the ruling authority of the land of Israel at the end of days will be a regime that will no longer believe in God, as has been the practice of our ancestors. As a result, it will abandon religion and observance of the commandments. Okay, and obviously it's very obvious that up until very recently, that has been the character of the government and the character of Israel. That's really tried to, as much as possible, be a Western country with a liberal democracy, and that's been the stated intent of the secular Zionist movement, and it's been like that more or less for the last 75 years. It's changed a little bit in the last year with the last election, but it's basically everything that's coming out now has been as an outcome of that policy. And again, it also says here, so the Rambam also speaks about this. So it's been spoken about in the Gemara. It's actually in Sota 49, Daf 49, the 15 things. And you can't believe these 15 things, how accurate they are. Yeah, I don't want to interrupt, and I don't want to spend too much time, but basically it meant the key things that I remember that it mentions is the fact that there will be inflation, the fact, with prices will be high, that even though there's going to be lots of luxury or luxurious items, they're going to remain expensive, even though that they're abundantly available. It speaks about the heresy of the government of Israel, and it speaks about the borders, the people living in the border towns, running away from the enemy, then having nowhere to go, and that being part of the way of life. So, which is exactly what's happening now. Okay. Okay. So here's the Rambam. So the Rambam again in his letters, in his advice, in his letters to the Yemenites, this is what he says: it is well known to you, our brothers, that because of our abysmal sins, the Holy One, blessed be He, casts us among this nation of Ishmael, which treats us very badly. As He decreed, our enemies are our judges. Yeah, that's Devarim 32:31. No nation that has stood against Israel has been more antagonistic. And as we pursue peace with them, they pursue hostility and war against us. It goes without saying that if we draw attention to ourselves and call ourselves a kingdom with meaningless and false words, we put our lives at risk. Okay, he didn't know what he was saying, but I mean he did. But basically, what he's saying